So I know you've probably heard this time and time again. You're not going to find anything in Diablo 2 Resurrected if you're not out there farming in a full game in a full party. But hold up real quick. Did you know this is not actually true? There's actually certain instances, certain locations, and if you're out there farming for certain things, it is actually better to be farming on Players 1 difficulty in a game solo by yourself than it is to be out there in a full game. I want to stop real quick to give a huge shout out to the patrons and the channel members. With your guys' support, you literally make it possible for me to keep streaming and making videos on this channel. So the reason I decided to make this video is because literally all the time when I'm farming on my single player, trying to hunt those crazy uniques, Griffins or D-Web, Windforce, whatever I'm looking for, I'll get asked all the time, Phil, why are you running these areas on Players 1 difficulty? It's going to make it so much harder for you to find the things that you're looking for. Well, this is actually not the case. So it might be a tad boring, but I got to describe exactly what we're looking at right here because I'm going to reference it like 7 times in the next 2 minutes. So we're looking at the odds for the no drop chance based upon the player setting and how many players are actually partied up and near you in the game. Now on this particular thing down here, you see, we'll just look at the very first line, P1-1, that's Players 1 difficulty, and the next one right on the other side of that dash is how many players are right by you in the game within roughly one screen's area around you. That's actually going to change the drop rate. So if you're on single player, you just have to look for, here we see P1-1, then you look for P2-1, so that would be as if you put it on Players X Command 2, but of course there's only one person in your party near you in the game because you're in the game by yourself. So that's why Players 1 difficulty and Players 2 difficulty on single player is identical, or if you're in a multiplayer game and there's 2 people in the game and they are not near each other, you get the same drop chance there. That's why it looks like there's so many all around, because the drop chance will slightly change online if there are people near you or if they're partied up and they're just spread out all amongst the game in different acts and things like that. So real quickly, I'm going to throw up arrows to the different drop rates that would be relative to the Players X command on single player here. We got Players 1, Players 3, Players 5, and Players 7, and they do not change on single player because if you go to Players 8, it's still P8-1, which would be on the same line as P7-1, so the drop rate would not actually change. But if you do see here, if you're online Players 8 game with 8 players all right next to each other, there is essentially no chance that any monster you kill won't drop you an item. I think I worded that backwards, but you know what I mean. One important thing to understand when it comes to players difficulty is that the champions, super uniques, they always drop the same amount of items no matter what. Now, the higher players difficulty count will affect what the normal white monsters drop, so you'll get a very, very high no drop chance if you're running on Players 1 difficulty. Now, actually, the no drop chance for Players 1 is over 60%. So actually, a majority of the monsters you kill are not going to drop anything, the actual normal white monsters, that is. Now, this is a very important point to note here, because if you're out there specifically trying to get the super rare uniques and you're only out there targeting champions, running it on Players 1 difficulty is always going to be best. You're going to be able to kill those monsters much faster, and they drop the same number of items every single time, no matter what the player's difficulty is. So that is the very first instance, which I'm going to note right here. If you're specifically farming super rare uniques in 85 areas like I do all the time, Players 1 difficulty often is the most preferred. Now that is if that's specifically the only thing you are farming. If you're also trying to get bases and runes, you could up the player's difficulty count, because then you'll have a better chance of getting those off of the plain white mobs that are in that area. But specifically, just the super rare uniques, if you're doing a holy grail, farming on Players 1 difficulty can be the most optimal in a lot of cases. Another thing I'll bring up is you have to take into consideration your kill speed. Now, if you get all the way up to the higher players difficulty counts, you're going to have a lower no drop chance, which means you will find more stuff. Even if you're hunting runes, you'll have a better chance of finding them. But if it takes you 7 minutes to kill 1 cow on Players 8 difficulty, but it only takes you like 5 seconds to kill a cow on, we'll say, Players 3 difficulty, you're probably going to have a better opportunity to find high runes on that Players 3 difficulty. It's because there is the largest jump in no drop chance between Players 1 difficulty and Players 3 difficulty than there is all the way up till the Players 7 difficulty. The gap from 1 to 3 is a very large amount that can really help you out. So if you don't struggle going from players 1 to players 3, you're generally going to want to try to do that if you can, whether you're online, find 2 people to party up with, or if you're on single player, just switch that player's X command. The next one coming up here on this little tips list is going to be when you're farming the Countess. It's a little known fact, but if you have a higher player's difficulty count, the Countess will then drop more items, and what can actually happen is that the item drops can actually overrule the actual rune drops from the rune drop table of the Countess. If this does happen, it's going to limit your chance to find runes. So if you are farming the Countess and you're specifically trying to get lucky, maybe get an Ist rune, an a pull, and things like that, actually running the Countess on lower players' difficulty counts will actually give you a better chance of finding better runes, and you'll absolutely, even if you're just trying to get lower runes to make spirit sets or insight sets, you're gonna find more if you're running them on just players 1 difficulty in-game solo by yourself. That's why, in my opinion, running the Countess to make spirit sets and insight sets and all different things like that, getting the keys from the Countess, is an absolutely epic way to gain value at the beginning of ladder, because you can just hop in and cycle through games all by yourself. Now, there is an argument to be made. If you're trying to get keys from the Countess, you technically can find more often if you're running it on a higher player's difficulty with more people in the game. But in my opinion, that does not counteract the bonus you get from finding more runes, and in my experience, it's all anecdotal, it's all RNG, it's all luck driven, but it doesn't really feel like I find any more keys on a higher player's difficulty count from the Countess than when I just run it on players 1. That is totally anecdotal. I know the odds and the percentages say otherwise, but if it just doesn't feel like it and you're sacrificing a chance to get a really good rune, which obviously then you could trade for the really good gear you need, I'm just going to go ahead and stick with players 1 for the Countess till the end of time. So I'd be doing a disservice if I didn't make sure I reiterated and mentioned all the reasons why running players 1 wouldn't necessarily be the best. If you're hunting runes and you have good kill speed, you want to do it on higher players difficulty count. That no drop chance decreasing by a ton will definitely increase the number of chances you get to find a high rune, so more than likely you'll find a high rune faster. If you're looking for any of those rune word bases, you definitely want to try, if possible, if the kill speed is there, to run them on the higher players difficulty counts, because you'll find more bases that will drop, which gives it more chances for them to then roll with different amounts of sockets, and then hopefully get lucky and one of them rolls with the amount of sockets that you do indeed need. And also, if you're trying to get experience, every single player's difficulty count that you go up, you will get a ton more experience from monsters. So if you're trying to get experience, if you're trying to level up, if you can do it even just up on players 3 difficulty compared to players 1, you'll get more drops and more stuff, you'll get more experience. So if you can, this is all comes down to if you can, if the kill speed is there. In circumstances besides specifically hunting uniques for a holy grail, you're mostly going to want to try to run on higher players difficulty counts. But if you're doing a holy grail like myself, like I've been doing on single player for a long time, or if you're just strictly really trying to get those useful uniques online, there's certain areas that you can run and farm in a certain way, and players 1 difficulty is actually going to be optimal for those areas. You want to see what you can really find when farming on players 1 difficulty? Check this video out right over here. And before you go, make sure you hit the like button and check and make sure you're subscribed up.